Quick tip for any aspiring YouTubers out there, not only are AMAs not an obligation, they're a terrible idea, nobody watches them, you should never do them. Thanks for 100,000 subscribers. No, but seriously, thank you for 100,000 subscribers, and also thank you for all of your responses to the AMA announcement. There were a lot of them. I can't get to every single question, but I am going to try and answer a good chunk of them, and one of the ways I can do that is by lumping similar questions together, and a lot of people actually had questions about sort of what my plans are for this channel, future updates, future content ideas, things along those lines, so we're going to break that into the first part of this video. A few chunks here. The first one is going to be a little bit more of a sort of state of the channel update video kind of thing. Then I'm going to do some really frequently asked questions that come up a lot, and then more general questions afterwards. So, very first thing I want to say for the future of the channel is that Smash is not going away. Like, I want to put that up front right away, but it is kind of an inevitability that now that Smash Ultimate is completely wrapped up and we're probably not going to get any new Smash news for a long time, it's going to start declining in popularity. That's actually something that I and many other content creators I've spoken to have noticed. Smash views have been declining for a while, and there's nothing really indicating that this trend is going to reverse until we get Smash 6 news, and God knows when that'll be. Thankfully though, even at its base level, Smash is a really big series. It is evergreen to some degree. It's not a kind of flash in the pan, hype on release and then it's gone sort of situation, so I can still make videos on it. As an example, a video that I was going to try and get out this month originally before its scope kind of ballooned was a revamp of my best of every Smash Ultimate move video. Now that we've got all of the characters, all of the DLC, all of the patches for moveset updates, all that kind of stuff. I realized that probably wasn't actually going to make it out this month, and even if it did, it would be me absolutely torturing myself over the holidays to try and get out kind of a really lame version of it, so save that one for a little bit later, but I think it's shaping up to be pretty good. Another one that's very concretely happening is the comeback characters episode my Discord server voted on. After that, there are a number of ideas I'm open to. I actually think the last couple of Smash releases on this channel were some of my better work, and a lot of people requested some kind of serious aspect to them. I'm not going to commit to that, but it is sort of an option on the table, and there's plenty of other stuff I'm thinking of as well. That said, I have gotten a lot of questions about whether I plan to diversify my content more moving forward, and yes, I do, and in particular, I've gotten questions about the Hardy retrospective I released on Breath of the Wild earlier this year. And in that case, I can definitely say yes. In fact, I've already started working on the next Zelda retrospective in the background. They take a long time to make, as you might expect, so maybe don't expect it for a little while still, but it is definitely coming. I love long-form video game analysis. It's one of my favorite things to watch on YouTube. I use it to help me sleep sometimes. I use it as company while I'm editing my own content, and I've had a bunch of people under that video tell me that they use it for similar things, which I think is so cool. I found that video really fulfilling to make, and also Breath of the Wild is one of my favorite single-player video games ever, so I loved having an excuse to turn it into work. That's not purely a positive thing, mind you, but overall it was still a very good experience. I want to cover the other 3D Zelda games, maybe something like Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, Pokemon Sword and Shield, Metroid Dread, some Mario titles, Fire Emblem, maybe even other games that I've never had the chance to play before, like I just bought Okami HD on Black Friday. It's been on my backlog list for so long, but I've just never really had an excuse to sit down and commit to it, but if it can turn into content, then suddenly I've got an excuse. I've also had people ask if I plan to do a Hardy retrospective for Smash Ultimate or a retrospective video of some kind, and the Hardy retrospective thing, that one is probably going to have to wait a little ways. The main reason being that if you haven't seen the Breath of the Wild one yet, I go into really heavy detail on essentially every aspect of the game. So if I were to do that for Smash Ultimate, that would essentially mean that I'm out of things to talk about with Smash Ultimate. I'm not going to say that's never going to happen, but you can imagine it's a bit of a scary box to open. Retrospective content of some kind like I've done in the past, yeah, that one's totally on the table. Now, there's one other series on the channel I haven't talked about yet, the Signature Move tier list. My Discord server already knows this. That one's going away after the next episode, sorry to say. Number one most obvious reason for this is performance. They just don't tend to do that well on my channel, but another thing to consider is that they generally take the most effort of pretty much any video format I make too. So you've got a series of videos that take a lot of effort to create and that nobody watches after they're created. On top of that, one of the roles they were supposed to serve on the channel was to let me talk about more single player type games outside of Smash, but as mentioned, I think the Hardy retrospective format is a way more promising way to do that. I'm not going to go into direct numbers here, but here's a fairly frank breakdown of how YouTube works as a business for me, because it is my full-time job at this point. My main source of income per month is not the video I release that month. Arguably, the biggest benefit to putting out a new video on MockRock is that it gets more people to check out my back catalog, and you know what people don't tend to check out? The signature move tier list. You know what people do check out month after month after month after month? Breath of the Wild, a hearty retrospective. It's one of the major advantages of that long-form evergreen format. That video was a huge risk that I thought for a long time had not paid off at all. It performed terribly for the first few months, but the thing is, it just kind of kept going and has kept going. So if we're talking about basically anything, if we're talking about the role it fills on the channel, if we're talking about monetization, if we're talking about the personal fulfillment I get out of making them, I'm sorry to say the signature move tier list just doesn't really have a place anymore. I will still make the Screw Attack episode. That one got voted on and I'll fulfill that obligation, but after that, yeah, sorry. I know a lot of you aren't necessarily huge fans of the series considering its view count, but there are a handful of people who have said it's their favorite thing on the channel. Fun experiment, happy with the videos themselves, but it just didn't really pan out in the grand scheme of things. On the topic of diversifying content though, I have a second channel now, MockRock Talk, where I can put up whatever the hell I feel like. That's actually why I set up this studio after it wildly outperformed my initial expectations for it. On this channel, I've more or less completely lost the freedom to experiment with like reaction videos or casual tier lists or anything along those lines, but on MockRock Talk, like if I want to put up a Pokemon starter tier list or whatever random little thing and see if it works, cool, I can just do it. And if it doesn't work, who cares, because it barely took any time to make. Basically every video you see on MockRock takes weeks to make, sometimes more than a month, whereas MockRock Talk, I don't think I've ever spent longer than 3 or 4 days on a video, and some of them perform just as well as videos on the main channel. Look, I'm gonna be honest, the smartest thing to do would probably be to completely lean into that more casual format. People clearly don't care about quality as much as they care about consistency and good titles and thumbnails and concepts for videos. I knew this to some degree, but I didn't realize just how big the gap actually was, but I don't really want to do that. I like to think that MockRock videos tend to stick to a fairly high standard, and I want to keep the feel of this channel that way. That's why I actually created a second channel. It allows me to experiment with more casual and low effort stuff without quote unquote contaminating the feel of this one. In fact, if anything, it does the opposite. Because I'm getting extra income from that channel, it allows me to spend more time on, for example, the best of every move revamp and not need to stress too much about rushing it out the door. And when it comes time to commit more firmly to the next hearty retrospective, you'll see a similar thing. Before, what I had to do was just completely go dark on YouTube, sometimes for months at a time, which is really scary, whereas nowadays these more ambitious videos can be less stressful to create because I know I've got at least something going out this month. I always have people saying like, oh, MockRock feels like a channel with more than 100,000 subscribers, why are you growing so slowly? The actual answer is just straight up, I don't release videos that often. But here's the thing you need to know, subscribers don't actually matter. I know it's a funny thing to say for a 100K celebration video, but it's true. What actually matters on YouTube is views you get every month, and because of MockRock Talk, I can actually guarantee some views coming in. So yeah, check out that channel if you want. It is fun. It's kind of even my more fun channel, and people do seem to like the content on it. It's not like it takes zero effort to produce, it just takes days instead of weeks to make a video. As for how streaming fits into these future plans, at the moment it honestly doesn't. I may start streams back up again at some point in the future, but although I do like them, I don't like doing them as much as making videos, and your reward for investing a ton of time into doing more streaming is that you get to spend more time doing streaming instead of making videos. A major exception to that may be if it's content that I need to record anyways, but we'll see. This is a very firm not committing to anything. I'm going to keep my Twitch info in my description and everything just to make sure that people can still find it and be prepared for the future, but no immediate plans. So the next section is going to be some questions that I get a lot of. Like I said, I'll probably make a proper FAQ video at some point, but I'll answer them here too. What are the origins of my name and logo? Name comes from this. This is my BC Rich Mockingbird guitar. As for my logo, I wish it had a more interesting story behind it, but honestly, it's just the stylized M that I pushed in a little bit. I try to make it a little more blatant in my intro. Speaking of my intro, a couple of recurring intro questions. Who's X character? That's Ganondorf from Ultimate, into Raccoon Mario from Super Mario Bros. 3, except I think he's using the Mario 64 voice line, Kirby from Ultimate, Link from Breath of the Wild, and then Dark Pit from Ultimate. Where did Ike go? Where did Sylvanos go from the old version? I updated my intro for the Breath of the Wild release because I knew that this was not going to be a platform fighter video, and I was maybe planning to do some more non-platform fighter videos in the future as well, so what that meant was that a purely platform fighter intro would be kind of weird. Rivals of Aether you can still find in the intro. Ike you can still find in half my videos with me complaining about him. As for my intro song, that's one I get asked about a lot as well. It's called MockRock is Here. I made it. At the moment, it's available if you're on my Discord server. In the future, who knows, I might do something else with it, but I can't say for now. That applies to any original music you hear in my videos, by the way. Yes, I do still like making it. It's mainly just a time thing, but I do have a couple of songs that are just like a few tweaks and then I'm mixing and mastering away from being ready. Here's a brief preview of one of them. Listen up for those in the backgrounds of my videos in the future. Why do I not tend to cover Project M or Project Plus or something similar in my videos? So I have played those. I usually lean towards Ganondorf because they tend to do him at least a bit more justice than he gets in the official games. I don't really include them in videos because A, it's just kind of a scary thing to do. I think you can probably understand where I'm coming from with that. But B, the more important reason is that once I open those floodgates, there's no real clear line where it should shut again. As soon as you mention one unofficial fan gamer mod, there's no real reason why you shouldn't be talking about all of them. I don't want every video to have to veer off into a ton of different directions talking about how different mods have handled a certain aspect of a character, and I don't consider just talking about P+ to be valid in that case. The fact that it's more popular doesn't change anything about its fundamental game design compared to other mods. Who are my biggest inspirations? This one's honestly a little bit weird to answer at this point because I've spoken to a bunch of other people in the Smash world. I'm not going to name any purely or even mostly Smash content creators for that reason. I'll give you two outside of that. The first is Quarry Gaming. I've talked about that channel before. It is one of my favorite channels, if not my favorite channel on YouTube. Definitely had a big influence on the direction MockRock took. And the other, I mentioned game design analysis channels. I like basically all of them. Name a big one and I've probably seen most of their back catalog at this point, but my favorite of them is Matthew Matosis. And I get a feeling that a lot of them would probably say the same thing. And then I get a lot of questions about the hardware or software I use. I'm going to go way deeper into that for the FAQ video, but I'll list the fundamentals here. For videos like this, which is typically more what I'm doing on MockRock Talk, everything's just recorded in OBS. I've even got like scenes set up in OBS so that I need to do less editing in post. I can just switch it on the fly. But then if I'm recording a MockRock video that's audio only, I do it in Reason. Reason is honestly not the absolute best digital audio workstation to be working purely with audio. It's much more of a creative tool. You can create some really fun music on it, but it does the job for me and I use it for everything at this point, so there's no point getting a different program just for audio. As for editing, the vast majority of lifting is done by Premiere Pro. I use Photoshop for graphics and thumbnails, and then After Effects comes in once in a while for specific little niche uses. Another bit of software I just picked up recently, which is literally one of the best things that I ever bought, is Timebolt, and I'm just going to put a disclaimer up here right away. This video is not sponsored by Timebolt, but I did get an affiliate link from them. What that means is that I have a unique link in the description and pinned comment for this video along with a coupon code, which means that if you buy it using those, you get a discount, but also this is the part that you need to be cautious about. I get a cut of the profits when you do that. That means I'm no longer impartial. I have an incentive to sell you something, so you should be approaching everything I say with skepticism here. But having said that, the reason I looked up whether they had an affiliate program was because I knew I was going to be ranting about this software anyways, and it's legitimately made my job so much better. What it does is pretty simple. It completely chops up your video for you and gets rid of all the silence in between takes. Then you just have to really quickly scroll through and delete bad takes, and maybe if it chops off the end of a T or something every now and then, just go fix that, which takes like a second or two. It's hard to express just how much more pleasant this makes editing. Like this video you're watching right now, the recording is probably going to be several hours long. Going through and adding every single one of those cuts by hand was a horrible, boring, long process that I absolutely dreaded having to do every time I made a video. With Timebolt, I know it's not even going to take an afternoon for me to knock this out. I literally like it so much that I ran my last MockRock script through it, which doesn't even use this jump cut format. So yeah, really honestly phenomenal software for anyone on YouTube. I am trying to sell you something, but it's great, and if you want to get it, use my affiliate link and coupon code for a discount. All right, now on to just straight up miscellaneous questions. Are the DLC overpowered? So we don't really know what state the game's going to be in a couple years from now. My guess is no. I think most people agree that a lot of the DLC have turned out to be really good, Pyra, Mythra, and Joker in particular, but still, the frontrunner for best character in the game tends to be Pikachu, and the fact that that still isn't a particularly unanimous consensus 3 years into the game's life just shows how well balanced Ultimate is. So no, I think calling pretty much any character in this game overpowered is a stretch, and you want DLC to be good. That's the thing. You don't want a bunch of characters that get introduced and do absolutely nothing. What are my favorite game series outside of Smash? There are honestly really only two that I'm actually super invested in beyond Super Smash Bros. New Fire Emblem mainline games, and new Legend of Zelda mainline games. Am I planning to talk about other platform fighters in the future? So I'm certainly going to make a sort of roundup video that dives into a lot of them all in one big video. That one's definitely gonna have to wait a bit because we've got some other fairly significant platform fighters on the future though. We've got Multiverses, we've got Framemakers, we got Rivals 2 in the works. Whether I'm willing to wait around for all of those to be released, I'm not totally sure, but I'd like to see at least some of them come out first. Beyond that, who's to say? I get the feeling that a lot of people think I plan my channel out in advance way way more than I actually do. So I traveled to Dublin a few years back to do the hostel life thing for a week, and to my surprise, overwhelmingly, the biggest group that I found in my hostel were Italians. As it turns out, Dublin's a really popular vacation spot for them. A bunch of us became friends and hung out for the entire time we were there, and a few days later we ended up at a pub for lunch. This pub served North American style pizza, including Hawaiian pizza, which one Italian girl in particular found absolutely horrifying. I convinced her to try a slice, and literally after one bite, she got this pleasantly shocked look on her face, and that's because Hawaiian pizza is one of the best pizzas and pineapple is one of the best pizza toppings. I've got some questions about my background here. Am I coming from a game design perspective, etc.? So yeah, I've been like tinkering with video game prototypes and stuff since middle school, and my degree is computer science with a specialization in graphics and video games. My honest plans after I graduated were to go and work in the video game industry for a while, and then eventually strike out and try to make my own platform fighter. But then, of course, YouTube started taking off. I don't want to oversell my qualifications though, like I have never shipped a video game, it's just something I've messed around with in my own time, and my other influences just come from really being interested in game design genuinely. I've seen basically every GDC presentation at one point or another. I love watching game design critiques from other YouTubers. I love taking these sometimes extremely seemingly convoluted systems and games and breaking them down into their individual little components and seeing what really makes them tick. It's an area I've always found fascinating, and it's also, by the way, why I'm so harsh sometimes. Like one bit of feedback I got in that Breath of the Wild video was that I was too negative throughout the entire thing. First off, I just kind of don't agree with that to begin with. I had plenty to praise about the game, but it's as much about me as it is about the game. Those questions of like, why does this aspect work? Why does this one not? What do I think we could change to make it work? Those are things that I just find inherently interesting, so I like to answer them in my own content. My voice, on the other hand, no real background there. I guess you could say YouTube is my background, because again, I've been doing this for longer than you think. I've gotten rid of a lot of my old crappy videos. I do think I'm a decent speaker in front of a mic at this point, and it all comes from just constant practice, because it is a weird thing to do when you're not used to it. That doesn't mean I've always gotten it right though. Like I went through a phase, for example, a little earlier on in YouTube where I got a few comments saying that I was slurring some of my words too much. And by the way, most people aren't going to take the time to comment on that. So if you see more than like 1 or 2 comments criticizing something you're doing, it's usually worth paying attention to it to at least some degree. So I tried to fix that up. I made an actual conscious effort to fix up the, I guess, sort of formal technique of my speech, and then I got a bunch of people saying that I was stretching out the end of my sentences. I think that was probably because I had too much air that was being expelled from my lungs, so then I tried fixing that up too, which I think I did for the Breath of the Wild video, which a lot of people said sounded too monotone. Too much bass mixed in there as well, and by the way, in all cases, the comments were completely right, and I look back on it now and it's like, how did I not hear these? The thing is, trying to actually objectively judge your own voice is essentially impossible, especially because you literally don't hear it the same way everyone else does, so keep at it and look for consistent criticisms and try to work on them. What is my favorite video that I've made? I don't know if I actually have like a firm favorite, but like I said, I do think the last couple of ones that I made are genuinely some of my better work. And a lot of people actually told me similar things, particularly for the top 10 underrated moves list. That said, I'm really heavily biased because basically every video that I look back 6 months later, I'm kind of embarrassed by. I always notice a bunch of stuff that I screwed up on and could do way better. As for my favorite and least favorite parts of the video making process, voice recording really sucks because I'm terrible at it. You only hear the final product, but make no mistake, you're being lied to. You only hear the final result, but make no mistake, you're being lied to. I record so many takes. Capturing footage can be fun. It's often not nearly as fun as you'd think, considering I'm playing video games. It's often more along the lines of meticulously setting up little situations until I get it right. But like, again, the Breath of the Wild video, at least some of those playthroughs I went through were genuinely fun to be able to call work. But I think my absolute favorite part of the video is once the timeline is mostly finished and I get to add music, because then all of a sudden it becomes done. I can't fully explain it, but spending weeks of your life working on something in kind of an unfinished prototype state and then suddenly having a track under it and realizing this is what your audience is actually going to be experiencing, that's pretty satisfying. What's my favorite platform fighter archetype? Heavyweight projectile sword fighter. Give Ike his sword beam from the Fire Emblem games. Sylvanas from Rivals of Aether somewhat fits the bill here. Am I ever going to give box style controllers a try? So Not the ones with digital inputs for movement, but I am a backer on the Smash Stick, the one that uses an analog stick for its movement. That one got delayed because of component shortages, but supposedly it's actually starting to get shipped out in the next few months, so I'm excited about that. Between that and the Panda controller that just got announced, hopefully that means my controller woes are going to be solved in the future, because I use a Pro controller right now, but my god, the snapback on that thing is terrible. But it's way more comfortable on my hands than a GameCube controller, and it's got like the extra left bumper, which I actually use. So there's no perfect solution for me right now. Hopefully there will be soon. Okay, so some kind of YouTube-y questions here. First one, how did I grow on YouTube? Honestly, the basic answer for that is just kept going. You constantly hear how it's too late to grow on YouTube and that no one actually gets the chance on this platform anymore. I've heard that line so many times. It's crap. The vast majority of people on YouTube, like we're literally talking 99%, are never going to put any kind of effort into growing their channel, which you really don't have to. You can just treat it as a hobby. That's fine. Out of the remainder, the majority of them are going to keep plugging away at the format that 50 other people already have a stranglehold on, or they're going to upload twice a week for 5 years without ever making the slightest effort to improve their quality or dip into more marketable topics. And then those are the kinds of people you often see going and complaining about how much they tried on YouTube and how much the algorithm is biased against them. Honestly, I think YouTube mostly works like most other aspects of life. You take advantage of your lucky breaks when you can get them. For example, I started getting my first little bit of a foothold around the end of Smash 4's lifespan with my Smash Ultimate like speculation kind of content. That was what gave me just a little bit of a foothold in the world, but that means absolutely nothing if you don't take it and run with it. You need to work hard, but you also need to work smart. I like to think I've done my best to do those, but I've obviously not done everything perfect. That's the thing, there's always room to grow. A lot of people ask me for advice about like starting their channel or growing their channel, and I usually basically offer it in 2 chunks. The first and more significant one is just start, just upload something. If you're not uploading anything, you have no chance of growing your skill set, but the other part of it is that you do need to be making an effort to grow that skill set and improving yourself over time. You need to be extremely critical of your own content, which isn't always all that easy to do. The most important resources you have are free tutorial videos for general basic video functions, the content of other creators you enjoy. Most likely your channel is going to end up as some kind of blend of your influences, and time, because that's the nice thing about YouTube. There's no limit on time. You have as many chances, as many formats, as many ideas as you want to try and succeed. As for motivation to try and get into YouTube full time, don't. Don't do that. That's my honest advice. Going into YouTube with the mindset that it's going to become your job is a really great way to suck all the life and fun out of it long before you've reached that point. It is not a guarantee. While it's still your hobby, treat it like a hobby. Put the same kind of quality standards you'd like to put into it if you wanted it to be your job, but make it fun. The whole reason that I actually ended up being able to do YouTube for a job is because I did it for fun for literal years. Okay, I need to emphasize that. Literal years of content, most of which I've deleted because it was terrible, that I put out before I made a penny off YouTube, and most YouTubers have the same story. Then it started making enough money that I could go part-time at work, and then I was making enough money on YouTube that I had to take a bit of a risk and see if it was going to work out to go full-time. And I took the risk, and it happened to pan out. It was a scary decision to make, and even at that stage for me, there was still no guarantee that it was actually going to work. Do I have any pit or dark pit advice? So the pits are largely very fundamental based characters. You don't need to try and get too fancy with them. I will say one specific thing you should try and learn with them are their throw setups, because they've got a lot of them and they're very dependent on percentage and DI. A couple other just very basic tips. Back air is a neutral tool that I think people tend to underrate a lot. It's quite solid. It's really safe on shield. And then rising neutral air as an edge guarding tool is really powerful because of how long the hitbox lasts and the angle it sends opponents at. Catching air dodges with the pits really isn't that difficult. It's something they kind of prey on, and you can use arrows to burn those resources even more. But just as a heads up, try to limit how much you use falling neutral air as an edge guarding tool. It's sad that I should have to say that, but it's true. Opponents tend to pop out of it, although you can still sometimes drag them down. Are there any changes I'd make to Pit apart from fixing his hitboxes? Honestly, I think that's the main thing he needs. I feel like making up throw kill for him would be pretty fair. It kind of reinforces the give him a little bit of everything line. Don't make it like an incredibly strong killing up throw. I think honestly that's a little bit overkill and out of his archetype, but being there to some degree I think is okay. A lot of the other changes I've said before, I wanted to see like up tilt being a proper combo move, down tilt being a proper combo move. Those actually happened in patches, thankfully. Some questions about my favorite music. Okay, looking down the list, I'm actually seeing a whole lot of favorite questions in general. We're gonna do a favorites roundup, I think. So my generally favorite music of all time, 2 bands kind of stand above the rest for me. The first is the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and the second is Linkin Park, specifically the Thousand Suns era. That's my favorite album of all time. In terms of video games, I've never played Enter the Gungeon, but my god, does that game have an amazing soundtrack. I've used so many of its songs in my videos. And then I love the cadence of Hyrule OST, kind of rock and electronic remixes of Zelda songs. But then the boring answer, Zelda music. Like, of course it's fantastic. And in particular, Lake Hylia from Twilight Princess has possibly my single favorite video game song of all time. In terms of Smash menu themes, I'm sorry, that's the objectively correct answer. What's my favorite movie? District 9, although the Lord of the Rings films are up there too. What's my favorite Pokemon game or favorite Pokemon? Favorite Pokemon game is still Sapphire and probably always will be. I really don't know how anything, no matter how high quality it is, could ever actually unseat it. As for my favorite Pokemon, it's Houndoom, because he looks sick. What's my favorite voice line in Ultimate? What's my favorite move to use in Ultimate? Probably Dark Pit Silver Bow, and honestly, if he didn't have that, I probably would not play the character. I really like these kinds of versatile middle-of-the-road projectiles. It's not insane in the sense of something like, say, Samus's Charge Shot, but it can get a lot of work done, and you really feel like you're playing the game well when you get that work done. I don't want to undersell it too much, though. It honestly is a pretty good move, and on a more popular character, people would likely complain about it. What's my favorite fantasy creature? I really like the Ancient Egypt theme. Like, when I was a kid, I had a few Warhammer Fantasy Tomb Kings figures and stuff like that, so I've always really enjoyed, like, you know, those scorpions and all that kind of stuff, mummies. I don't know if you can really call any of those defined fantasy creatures, though, so I'm gonna have to pick the most boring answer imaginable and say dragons. What's my favorite character design in a different fighting game? I really like Astaroth from Soul Calibur. Just a super heavy hitter with a giant axe. I like the Bull Rush charge. I like the emphasis he has on ring outs, which is an interesting mechanic in Soul Calibur. I think that one's actually a pretty easy choice for me. My favorite food is Eggs Benedict. I have thought so for many years. I think it's basically the perfect food, and if you don't like basic Eggs Benedict, you can mix it up as much as you like. Béarnaise sauce over hollandaise sauce, though, which is basically just hollandaise sauce with tarragon in it, but completely transforms the flavor. And quick tip, if you mix just a little bit of hot sauce in there when you're making the sauce up, now we're talking. By the way, snails are over and underrated at the same time. They taste like absolutely nothing. Looking at the list of characters here, I really like watching Kazuya, Captain Falcon, that's an easy one, Bowser, Dr. Mario, Ganondorf, Wario, obviously the pits, I like to check out what's going on there. High-level Belmont play is surprisingly entertaining. And then Ryu, I'm very curious to see what happens with him after this patch. So those are some of my favorites. Oh, actually Rosalina as well, specifically Rosalina versus other zoners. That one I think creates some really interesting neutral. How has my experience with my community changed? Honestly, I wouldn't say it's changed drastically because I'm more of an analytical channel. I don't tend to put my personality and my personal life front and center. The concept of parasocial relationships is one I'm familiar with and not one I want to be leaning too much into. Like, I do have a Patreon and YouTube membership and Twitch subscriptions where you can come and join a Discord server and speak to me and to other members. That's cool. I like the little community we've built in there, and I also like that a lot of people in there are like smaller YouTubers who want thumbnail advice or something from me. That's something I actually really genuinely enjoy passing on, but I still try to be pretty careful. I'm not particularly comfortable hearing content creators refer to their audience as their best friends or particularly family. I do not do that, and I haven't given my audience any kind of nickname or anything along those lines. Thankfully, it's also not an angle my audience tends to lean into a lot either. So I can genuinely say, like, not trying to pander, but you guys are a good group. You really are. So apart from the usual being a bit more careful with what I say as my platform continues to grow, I haven't really had to change my community engagement too much because you guys haven't really made me have to change it. Why do I main Dark Pit, and who were some of my mains in other games? So there were a bunch of characters I was interested in coming into Ultimate. Dark Pit was on the list of characters I was interested in, but he wasn't at the very, very top. I was really thinking I was going to be an Ike or Simon main, but literally I picked Dark Pit up, moved around for 2 seconds with him and thought, oh, this feels good. I did play some Pit and Dark Pit in Smash 4, but I was always kind of frustrated with how they handled, and this basically felt exactly like how I wanted to be moving with them in that game. I've always liked very straightforward, non-gimmicky characters. I've always liked sword fighters. I've always liked projectile users, so Dark Pit really just fills that niche pretty perfectly for me. Dark Pit over Pit for me specifically because I prefer his arrows. My favorite aspect of Smash and any platform fighter is neutral, and I think Dark Pit's arrows are inarguably better in neutral than Pit's are. they just travel faster. The side B thing doesn't honestly really matter all that much to me. If anything, I think I'd rather have Pits, but the arrows give the nod to Dark Pit, and he's literally been my main since day one of the game. As for other games, Smash 64 I've dabbled in, but I've never really put enough time into it to have a committed main in that game. It honestly probably would be Kirby, just because I find it funny that Kirby is actually really good in a game. He is genuinely pretty fun to use though. Melee, I started out with Kirby like a lot of people do, but I mostly played Mario, Sheik, and Falco in that game. Nowadays, if I were ever going to get back into Melee, which frankly probably isn't happening, but if it were, I would probably play Link. I know he's not particularly good in Melee, but I really do like how he plays, and I'm not ever planning to reach the point where Melee tier list should matter to me. Within reason, I'm not willing to suffer through Melee Bowser. Brawl, I mained Ike easy. He's still probably my favorite feeling character in any Smash game. I kind of just did the same thing every Ike main did and switched over to Corrin. Question about what my script writing process is. I don't really know how much of a locked-in scripting process I have, to be honest. I don't really do outlines per se, but if it's like a list video, for example, my best of worst of videos, I will start by doing a lot of research and creating a short list, which often isn't actually that short, then way more research to whittle it down. And then the first pass of the script is usually 1 or 2 long like stream of consciousness sittings, and then I'll take 1 or 2 passes through to sort of tighten everything up more. And I almost always end up having to rewrite and re-record stuff afterwards anyways. What would I add to Ultimate? Better Echo Fighters is a very good start. I think they dropped the ball so hard on that just dynamite concept, and then just a little bit more hit stun would be nice. I got no problem with any Canadian stereotypes. I like Canada jokes, I like Canadian stereotypes. I think most stereotypes tend to come from somewhere for at least some reason. Helps that I do really like living in Canada. There's no such thing as a perfect country, but if you gotta pick one, honestly, I think we have it pretty good here. When am I finally making the big leap to an exclusively Nintendogs channel? What's up everybody, it's your boy back with another video. Today we're looking at the top 10 Nintendogs. Number 10, Golden Retriever. Classic for a reason, speaks for itself. Number 9. I've never played Nintendogs. That Golden Retriever thing was a guess. What design cues should Smash take from other platform fighters? Obviously, there are a million things I could list, but one specific one I want to focus on is the shield system. Basically, no other platform fighter that I know of uses the same depleting shield that Smash does, which I think is a good thing. It leads to situations where you pressed the right button, your opponent attacked, and you blocked, and yet you get hit anyways. Any time where that situation arises needs to be handled very, very carefully, and I think Smash is way too lax with it. Other platform fighters have like persistent blocking, except you get pushed backwards, or they have single directional shields. That's one I really like. It's actually an idea I had. When I talked about developing my own platform fighter, I had a lot of the mechanics planned out, and one of them was your shield only blocks you from the front. And even then I was considering the idea of taking chip damage, except characters had better defensive movement, and they had character-specific defense mechanics. It was a whole thing, but in any case, I really like the frontal shield idea, and I'm happy to see that games like Rushdown Revolt and Framemakers are running with it. That's cool. In terms of platform fighters actually directly being able to compete with Smash's numbers, so first off, they have Brawlhalla is more popular than Smash Ultimate. I know that sounds kind of weird to a lot of you, but it's true, and they mostly managed to do it with original IPs at the start. Really impressive and speaks to the power of free-to-play on PC. It's also worth noting that platform fighters really do not need to reach anything approaching Smash numbers to be considered a successful video game. That said, if you do want to try and hit those kinds of numbers, I think licensed IPs are pretty much a necessity. Obviously, something like Pokemon or Dragon Ball might be able to get something approaching there, but the other thing, it needs to be a really high quality game. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl got tossed around a little bit as a Smash killer, quote unquote, as much as I hate that term. I never really bought it all that much because the game is clearly being made with a lot of heart, but on a tiny budget. It was never really going to have the kind of production value to compete with Smash, which just looks and sounds phenomenal. Multiverses is the first of these that's come around where I've really perked up and kind of gone like, oh, wait a minute. Because it's got genuinely incredibly iconic characters that can directly compete with a lot of Nintendo's IPs, and it's clearly very polished with a lot of money thrown at it, and it's free to play on PC. These are the kinds of things that actually attract a lot of players, far more than wave dashing does, sorry to say. And according to rumors, there are several other major studios trying to encroach on Nintendo's space there with similar budgets and marketing, which, by the way, I think is a very good thing. Nintendo kind of has a monopoly on the platform fighter genre right now, which I don't necessarily think is healthy, so I'm rooting for them, and the best timeline is multiple good platform fighters to play. I can't really argue with that. Where do I get my ideas? There's no particular place. It can be a concept I've thought about since I started playing Smash. It can be like a conversation I've had or a video I've watched where there's just like one little seed in there that I'm like, this would actually be an interesting topic. It can be a suggestion from someone. It can come to me completely out of thin air. But in any case, where I literally pull my ideas from is a big Google Doc where I write down literally every potential video idea. Looking at it right now, which I'm not going to show you, it is 8 pages long, so I've got no shortage of them. What are my thoughts on Undertale and Deltarune? Bit of a loaded question because I know people feel very, very passionately about these games, but just heads up, I kind of don't have strong opinions on them. I've played Undertale on the first chapter of Deltarune. I'll probably get around to playing the second one at some point. I certainly think they're very well-made games, but I'm just not quite their target demographic, and like the meta aspect of them, maybe I've just been overexposed to meta content, but I don't really find it that impressive. I will say the most obvious thing in the world here though, the music is just ridiculously good for no reason, and the fact that it's mostly being made by the same guy developing the game, yeah, that's amazing. How do I schedule my day? You know, when I took on YouTube as a full-time job, I had this concept of like, you know, I was gonna get up at 9 a.m. and for the first 2 hours of the day after breakfast, I was gonna do scripting for future videos, and then I was gonna put a block of time aside for recording, and then editing this aspect, and then editing this aspect, maybe some kind of footage gathering or something for a blocker of an hour or two in the evening. That's funny. Speedrunning. I love speedrunning content. It's super cool to watch. I love these intricate breakdowns of how these games are just completely dissected. Will never, ever try and do a speedrun myself. That sounds like torture. Why do hot dog buns come in packages of 8 while hot dogs come in packs of 10? Ah, well damn, I've used up all my hot dog buns, but I still have 2 hot dogs left over. Guess I'd better buy more hot dog buns. Thoughts on Nintendo partnering with Panda? As much as I like Nintendo games, corporate Nintendo is terrible and everything they touch is poison, and that includes competitive Smash in the past. Panda, generally speaking, has a way better track record, at least here, so it really depends on how much Nintendo is letting them do their thing. What's the coolest video game weapon? It goes without saying that this is an incredibly subjective question. I don't know what the literal coolest one I think is. The one that pops into my head immediately that I've always really liked is the gravity hammer from Halo, especially because my favorite ways to play Halo are big team battles and particularly custom game modes where the gravity hammer tends to come up a lot. What's my biggest wish for Breath of the Wild's sequel? More consistently powerful and interesting rewards. I said it in my Breath of the Wild video, I'm a very extrinsically motivated player. The fact that you really don't upgrade Link very much outside of armor and some breakable weapons is one of my biggest letdowns in that game. The fact that Link seems to have this artificial arm now, which just has a ridiculous amount of things that you could potentially do with it, I'm excited about that one. Any characters that I wish I could play but just don't really work for me? I really like Sephiroth. I like his animations, I like his movement, I love his forward tilt, that's one of my favorite moves in the entire game, but the timing on his forward and back air trying to land close to the ground with it, I don't know, man. I really like how Sephiroth plays in Ultimate, and actually I'm a pretty big fan of Cloud too, even though I haven't actually played Final Fantasy VII. Meanwhile, I'm a fan of a bunch of the Metroid games, a reinvigorated fan after Metroid Dread like a lot of people, and yet I just cannot connect with any of the Metroid characters in Smash. What are my thoughts on video game emulation? Video games are art. Like any art form, they deserve to be preserved. If the owner of those games is willing to provide a high quality, reasonably priced way to emulate it, great. If they're not, which as it turns out is usually the case, that problem has other ways of sorting itself out. If I could travel anywhere in the world, where would I go? Japan. Me and my girlfriend are pretty synced up about that one. At some point in the future, maybe that's something people can actually start doing. Question about some of my favorite editing tricks and flourishes and stuff like that. I like the foggy edges look, the one you've been seeing on these questions. The channel is kind of supposed to have a little bit of like a sketchy and liquid or smoky feel to it. That one's relatively simple to do if you have Premiere Pro. It's just an effect called roughen edges and then you modulate some of the settings over time. In terms of a full-on sequence, one that I did fairly recently that I was pretty happy with was the rollback explanation in the Problems with Zoners video. It's a potentially pretty complex process to explain. I like to think that I did it in a way that's relatively easy to understand and looks minimalist, but not just straight up cheap. There's a big difference. What does my research process look like? That one honestly changes quite a bit from video to video. I don't know if I can really pin down a specific research process, but I will say one resource that I use a lot and has made my job much easier is ultimateframedata.com. Extremely compact, easily accessible info for every move in the game, and even if I'm not actually mentioning frame data in the video at all, it's basically unheard of that I'm not going to go to this website for at least one thing. What do I like most about Smash? So I can talk about mechanics all day, and I really do like Smash's mechanics, but at the end of the day, it's the roster. Take away the game design considerations, take away the competitive aspect, take away all of that, it's still ultimately a beautifully animated, beautiful sounding video game about all my favorite characters just beating the tar out of each other. Smash does a lot of things right, but its roster, particularly Ultimate's roster, is really what's so hard to compete with. What are my thoughts on Splatoon? I've honestly never played any of the Splatoon games, but that doesn't mean that I won't. I haven't played any shooters at all for a long time. I used to be all about Call of Duty and Battlefield, you know the drill. I stopped playing those a long time ago, and then when I played shooters after that, they tended to be much more interesting, quirky ones like Chivalry Medieval Warfare, which does have archers, but is also just kind of a medieval combat sim, or Robocraft. I was really into Robocraft for a while. That's a kind of third-person shooter, except the competitors are robots that you build yourself like Lego. That one checked a lot of boxes for me. I have no idea what state the game's in right now, or even if it still exists, but yeah, I got some good times with that. So I like the quirkier shooters more overall. So if I ever was going to get back into the genre, Splatoon would actually be one of the ones I'd consider, especially Splatoon 3 whenever it comes out. It looks like it does have some interesting ideas based on the trailer. Is Godzilla too big to be in multiverses? We're talking about a video game where Shaggy from Scooby-Doo ate a mysterious crystal because he thought it was candy and can now beat up Superman. If they want Godzilla in multiverses, they can fit Godzilla in multiverses. Who was the most important Ultimate DLC? I gotta say Steve, just from pure numbers. I'm not at all in the camp that likes to hate on Steve being introduced into Smash, but even if you are, you just kind of got to accept that a large percentage of the next generation of Smash competitors exist because Steve was put into Smash. Thoughts on Big Chungus? Honestly, one of the funnier meme images, and I'd be shocked if he didn't make his way into multiverses somehow. What changes are needed to Corrin and Ultimate? Honestly, just basically revert her back to Smash 4. What color are my socks? Basically, all of my socks look more or less like this. I wear Blundstones, which are an incredibly comfortable shoe. They don't have laces, good, screw laces. But the big catch is that most socks slip right down off your feet. What do I think about the Ice Climbers in Ultimate? I'm gonna give the same answer that essentially everyone has to give. I don't know. Yes, their combo game is insane. Yes, the AI is unreliable. This is the kind of character whose results could slowly fade over time as more and more people realize it's not worth the effort, only to have one person who really likes the Ice Climbers come along 4 years from now and completely blow everything out of the water. And finally, did I ever think I would make it this far? No. Thank you.